Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going on a deep dive into something pretty cool, I think. It's all about you, as always. You sent us tons of your research, your memories on the Acer Aspire One. Articles, forum posts. Some of you even sent in personal stories about this thing. Honestly, this little laptop is way more than meets the eye.
Yeah, what really gets me about this one is that the Aspire One, it wasn't just a laptop. No, it was like this symbol of a whole era in computing.
Yeah.
The netbook craze.
The netbook craze. Okay, maybe we should back up for a sec. For anyone who, doesn't remember those days, or heck, maybe wasn't even born yet, what was a netbook? Like, why were they such a big deal back then?
I think a good way to put it is, imagine before smartphones were really smart and tablets were like these expensive digital notepads. There was this like gap. People wanted portable computing, but full-blown laptops were still pretty pricey, bulky too. So netbooks, they kind of swooped in, filled that gap. Small, affordable, and mainly designed for the basics. Browsing, emails, a bit of light work, that sort of thing.
And the Aspire One, right in the thick of it, launched in July 2008. This wasn't just some random laptop. Looking at the research you sent in, this thing was a major player, especially for students. A lot of articles mention that.
Absolutely. Think about it. A student back then, a clunky, expensive laptop, not exactly ideal for, taking notes or lugging between classes. The Aspire One, compact, budget-friendly. It was like a dream come true for students. Opened up a whole world of possibilities, really, for learning on the go.
It's funny looking back. I remember those Intel Atom processors. At the time, I thought, man, these are slow. But I guess they were enough for what people needed, huh?
Gotta remember the context.
Yeah.
Back in 2008, things were different. Expectations were different. The Atom N270, it wasn't a powerhouse, but it was efficient enough for what it was meant for. It was all about handling those essential tasks without draining the battery in an hour.
Speaking of battery, those 3-cell and 6-cell options, that was pretty impressive back then for a little machine. Today, we're spoiled. All-day battery life. But back then, that was huge, wasn't it?
Huge, absolutely. 3 hours on the go was decent. But that 6-cell, squeezing out 8 hours, that was a game changer. Students could go to, back-to-back classes. Writers working in coffee shops, travelers. People could actually stay connected without, desperately hunting for an outlet.
And it wasn't just about, practicality. The Aspire One had some style. I saw in your notes you were raving about that sapphire blue model. Seashell white, golden brown. It seems Acer wanted to make a statement, right?
Yeah. Most laptops back then were pretty bland, very corporate. Acer, they went the opposite way, offering a rainbow of colors. It was a smart move, especially for attracting those, younger users, students. Suddenly your laptop wasn't just a tool. It was like an extension of your personality.
Okay, but personality aside, those early SSD options, wow. 8 GB or 16 GB. You could barely fit a cat video on that these days.
Yeah, wild how things change, right?
Yeah.
But back then, even those little SSDs were a big deal. They made the Aspire One feel snappy compared to those clunky old HDD laptops. Yeah, space was limited, but a lot of people were willing to make that trade-off to get that speed boost.
And if you needed more space, there were traditional HDD options too, right?
Exactly. Acer offered a whole range of HDD options, from 120 gigabytes all the way up to 500 gigabytes. If you needed to store tons of files, music, photos, the HDD was the way to go.
For me, where it gets really interesting is the operating system flexibility. Windows XP, Windows 7 Starter, that was the standard fare. But the Aspire One, it became this haven for Linux users, almost a techie playground, What were people saying about that?
It captured that, that early internet spirit, the experimentation. This was before app stores, everything was curated. People were still figuring out what they could do with these portable devices. And Linux distros like Olympus Linux Lite, Ubuntu Netbook Edition, those were perfect for these low-power machines. And for the really adventurous, some even managed to install Mac OS X on it.
Whoa, Mac OS on an Aspire One. That's hardcore. So it seems like Acer created this little machine that was both accessible and open to tweaking.
Exactly. Appealed to everyone, from casual users to the hardcore tinkers. It was like a gateway drug to customizing and pushing those limits.
Okay, so you've got affordability, portability, style, a bit of that hacker spirit. What's not to love, right? But sadly, all good things come to an end. Looks like January 2013 was the final curtain call for the Aspire One. What happened? Was it just a case of better technology coming along?
It really was a perfect storm. Technology, it doesn't stand still. Tablets were getting more powerful, sleek ultrabooks were popping up, better performance and still compact, and touch screens were starting to take over.
Yeah.
So suddenly that sweet spot the netbooks had, It wasn't so sweet anymore.
Yeah, it's like when you realize your favorite band isn't cool anymore, but everyone else has moved on. But, even though the Aspire one was discontinued, looking at all this research you sent in, this little machine, it had a lasting impact.
It really did. The Aspire one, and really netbooks in general, they shifted the way people thought about laptops. Before, they were these expensive, kind of intimidating machines, mostly for business, for serious work.
What?
The Aspire one, it made portable computing, well, accessible, affordable,
Yeah.
and yeah, even stylish.
Like you were saying before about students, it's a perfect example. Back then, not every student had a laptop, right? The Aspire one, it made it possible for more students to take notes, do research, work on projects anywhere. It was a game changer for education.
It democratized technology.
Yeah.
And you can see that echo in the rise of Chromebooks. They kind of picked up where netbooks left off. Affordable, portable, cloud-based.
Yeah.
Same idea, just, for a new era.
Funny how those trends go, full circle. But I'm curious, what was it actually like to use an Aspire one? I mean, we've talked specs, the impact, but what was the experience like?
Well, if you're used to, the power and speed of modern laptops, using an Aspire one today would feel like stepping back in time.
Mhm.
Small screens, cramped keyboards, and those early Atom processors, well, they weren't exactly speed demons.
Not exactly a smooth ride.
Not always, no. But it had a certain charm. You had to be patient, you had to work within its limits. But for a lot of people, it was their first taste of real, mobile computing freedom. They could take their work, their entertainment, their connection to the world anywhere.
It's easy to romanticize the past right there. But I can see how there'd be a certain satisfaction, making it work with those limitations. Like you were really in control of the technology, not the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. A sense of, empowerment in figuring things out, optimizing your workflow, finding those creative solutions. And, I can't forget, the Aspire one actually had a pretty robust set of features for its size. You had USB ports, SD card slot, even HDMI output on the later models.
Wait, HDMI on a netbook? What were they connecting them to back then?
You'd be surprised. Presentations, watching movies on a bigger screen. It was about making the most of what you had.
It sounds like the Aspire one was a true multitasker, even if it wasn't, the fastest or the most powerful. But, we haven't really talked about like the cultural impact. Did it have any, pop culture moments? Was it like the it gadget to have?
It wasn't quite as, I guess, iconic as, say, the first iPhone. But it had its moment. You'd see them everywhere. Coffee shops, college campuses, even in TV shows and movies.
Mm.
It represented this shift in how people saw technology. It wasn't just for work anymore. It was part of everyday life.
And that shift, that casualization of technology, it's something we totally take for granted now. But back then, that was revolutionary.
So we've talked about the Aspire one's rise, its impact, and yeah, even its decline. But what about you listening to this deep dive? What can we learn from this little machine that could? I think it reminds us that even in the fast-paced world of technology where, new gadgets appear every day, sometimes it's the most unassuming devices that have the biggest impact. The Aspire one, it might not be a household name today, but it really paved the way for the portable computing revolution that we're living in now.
It's a reminder that innovation isn't always about the flashiest specs or the most expensive price tags. Sometimes it's about finding that sweet spot, meeting a need, and empowering people in ways they never thought possible.
Exactly. And who knows what seemingly, ordinary tech from today we'll be looking back on, 10, 20 years from now with that same kind of fondness. Maybe those smart glasses everyone's talking about or those foldable phones.
Or maybe it's something we haven't even imagined yet. I mean, the possibilities, they're endless. And that's what makes exploring technology so fascinating. But before we get too carried away with the future, I think it's important to acknowledge the legacy of the Acer Aspire one. It might have faded from the spotlight, but its story, it's a reminder that sometimes the smallest devices can leave the biggest footprints. It really is amazing to think about, just how much the tech world has changed since the Aspire one was like king of the hill. What about for you listening to all this? What really stands out about how far we've come?
What gets me is how the Aspire one, it was so, unassuming, but it really set the stage for so much of what we just expect now. That desire for affordable portable computing, that's the foundation of everything. Smartphones, tablets, even those like super thin laptops we see now.
It's like the Aspire one planted a seed and then this whole forest grew up around it. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, if you had to boil down the Aspire one's legacy to one key takeaway, what would it be?
It's got to be the democratization of technology. The Aspire 1, it made computing power accessible to way more people. Students, writers, everyday folks who, maybe they couldn't afford a traditional laptop. Suddenly they had this tool to connect, create, learn.
And that ripple effect, we're still seeing it today. It's not just about the devices. It's about the possibilities they unlock.
Exactly. Empowering people to do more, learn more, connect with the world in ways that, people couldn't even picture before. And that's a legacy worth celebrating.
That's a great point. And it makes me wonder, what seemingly ordinary tech from today are we going to be looking back on 10, 20 years from now? Like those smart glasses everyone's making such a fuss about, or those foldable phones, they seem like something out of sci-fi.
Who knows? Maybe it'll be something we haven't even thought of yet. That's what's so cool about technology, right?
Yeah.
It never stops evolving, pushing boundaries, always surprising us with what's possible.
And that's what we love exploring here on The Deep Dive. So thanks for joining us on this trip back in time with the Acer Aspire 1. It might not be the most glamorous gadget, but it's a reminder that innovation, well, it can come in the most unexpected packages.
It's been fun diving deep with you. Always a good time revisiting those key moments in tech history and seeing how they shaped everything.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those tech fires burning.